Hey everybody, welcome back to the Rock and Metal Guardian. I'm Dane, your host. Hope you're doing great wherever you may find yourselves. Blessings to all of you wonderful people out there. I've seen it yet again on YouTube where Gene Simmons of Kiss has claimed that rock music is dead, so this video is a rebuttal, a counterpoint if you will, or a quiet rant as a response to said comment. Now, I've gone on record as saying that I'm in agreement with Gene Simmons, at least in this area, in his interview with Rather, and I've mentioned this a couple times on the channel, in his interview with Dan Rather, that is, Gene Simmons says that the last legendary band we've had is Nirvana. I would say Nirvana / Nine Inch Nails, so around 1990 is the last time we've had a legendary band, or a band of legendary status in their own time, if you will. Now, that does not mean to me that rock is dead just because you don't have any legendary bands. Let's keep in mind that when I say that, that's just an opinion. There's some of you out there, of course, who are going to argue that this band, the last 10 years, have been around, new band, if you will, is legendary. Okay, just keep that in mind. It's subjective. But if you argue that if you argue that rock is dead because there are no legendary bands around, to me that's just not logical thinking. That's idiotic or absurd or asinine to argue that you must have legendary bands for rock music to be, alive and kicking. That doesn't make sense. Again, I could be wrong, but I'm going to go on record and say I don't think that's correct, an assessment. So while rock isn't in its heyday anymore, and it hasn't been in a long time due to sales compared to female pop stars, your Taylor Swifts, your Olivia Rodriguez, your Lana Del Rey's, the list goes on. And then, of course, rock music in comparison to the sales of rap and hip hop is another example of rock not being in its heyday. However, there is a lot of rock, new rock, to be explored. I mean, just pick any YouTube channel. Just about most of them are going to talk about, myself included, although I don't do that very much, is going to point out and talk about, maybe sometimes on a weekly basis or monthly basis, hey, what's new in the rock and metal and hard rock and pop community, vinyl CD. So no, rock is not dead. There's, again, a lot of rock out there, a lot of new rock, main phrase there, new rock to be explored. And of course, there's bands that have been around for a long time that are still putting out stuff. More on that in a few minutes. So now keep in mind, whether I love, or don't love a lot of the new rock that is to be explored, that is irrelevant. What's relevant to this argument that rock isn't dead is that, like it or love it, rock is still alive and kicking. Again, may not be legendary, but it's around. It's still around, and there's a lot of it. So the point is, it's out there. So if it's out there, rock isn't dead. Examples: the new wave of traditional heavy metal. A lot of that going around. There's a ton of videos being done on that on YouTube and other places. Extreme metal, death metal, blast beats, that kind of thing. Catatonia comes to mind. Swedish death metal, right? Opeth comes to mind as well. So many of that in the extreme metal vein. Experimental noise rock like Sun O. Other bands like Ghost, right? Love 'em or hate 'em. Imitation classic rock, which is in the spirit of classic rock. Bands, and I've mentioned some of these bands before: Dirty Honey, Crown Lands, Greta Van Fleet, Black Country Communion, Dead Daisies, Winery Dogs, Red Sky Mary, Rival Sons, Blues Pills, Naked Gypsy Queens, and then from my last video, someone added the West Coast AOR blend or genre of music. This is DRocker4729. Thanks for posting this comment. Bands like Young Gun, Silver Fox, Monkey House, Page 99, The Expanding Man, and Quint Starkey. I'm not listening to these yet. I'm going to. So DRocker4729, thank you so much for that comment. But yes, this is another example of how rock is not dead. Other metal bands, High on Fire, still around. Megadeth's still around, going to be putting out a new album in the next year or so. Anthrax going to be putting a new album around in the next year or so. Swans has a new album coming out. So excited, in less than a week, thereabouts. Comes out on the 30th of the month. So, and then it'll take a couple days to get in. If I didn't mention Anthrax still around. They're supposed to be putting out a new album. Pantera, it's not the Pantera we know and love because the brothers are gone, but you have Zakk Wylde and the drummer from previous drummer from Anthrax, I believe, or the current drummer from Anthrax, I think. Correct me in the comments. Doing a great job. And Down, related to Pantera, right, is going to be putting a new album out. So I've heard. Waiting for that. I did a review on a relatively new band called Castle Rat. I highly recommend them. The very inspired Motorhead-like band Asomvel is still around. They're cool. The King Diamond, Merciful Fate inspired band Attic is wonderful. Not truly derivative, but really good. I highly recommend them. A band called Misty Mountain. The Dead at Sea, I discovered recently, really cool instrumental rock. And Death Cult 69, worth your time as well. Overall, all this music I've mentioned does pale a little bit in comparison to the glory days, and that's okay. There's big shoes to fill when you have bands like Zeppelin and Purple and Heap and Priest and Sabbath and Rush and Nazareth and all these legendary bands, Nirvana, you name it, right? Runs the gamut. But that doesn't mean rock is dead. Okay, who's to say that these bands I've mentioned, whether bands that are still going strong like Megadeth and High on Fire and Anthrax and these imitation classic rock and other bands, like Rival Sons, Red Sky Mary, Monkey House, Page 99, etc., won't be the jump start that we need for a return to bands like Zeppelin and Purple down the road. Who's to say these won't be the next wave of bands that, while not as great as the rock bands in their heyday, who's to say they won't inspire bands in the future to be as good and compete with bands like Sabbath and Purple, etc. So, who's to say? Finally, so Gene, if rock is dead, why are you still trying to be relevant? That makes you a hypocrite. You say rock is dead, and yet you go solo for a while. That doesn't work, so you reunite with Kiss and start doing a Vegas residency. So again, I ask, Gene, if rock is dead, why are you still trying to be relevant? We know the answer, the almighty dollar, but yeah, still a hypocrite. Now, Gene, you had a great career. It's time for others to shine. So in the immortal words of fictional character Elaine Bennis from the TV show Seinfeld, in talking to the soup fascist, let me say this to Gene. You're through. Next!